and welcome to another edition of Let's Get Down to Business. On this edition, I'm going to be speaking with some good folks from the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission in the person of Alucia Fisal. And I have also Dr. Winsome Leslie, who is the CEO of Dev Solutions Consulting, and she is a consultant on the project that we are going to be discussing on this edition of the program. Alucia and Winsome, welcome.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Tony.
you. Thank
Good.
you.
So it's a pleasure having you. Let's get straight into it, and I'll start with Alucia. Alucia, tell me about the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission and about this project that we are about to discuss, the crowdfunding project. If you want to just give me an overview.
All right. Okay, so Tony, the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission was established in 2001 by an agreement among the eight participating governments of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, and the ECSRC the ECSRC agreement was signed by these eight countries, and these countries are Anguilla, Antigua and Barbuda, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And
The ECS,
Alucia, not to cut you off, these are the
sorry, yes,
countries that have the EC dollar as their currency.
that is correct.
I just
Yes,
wanted to for my viewers to understand the part of the significance of this currency union. So
yes.
we all use the EC dollar. Go ahead.
Yes, indeed. And the ECSRC was established as the regulator or the regional regulatory body for the Eastern Caribbean securities market. And the Eastern Caribbean securities market was also established in 2001. A lot of persons would know about the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange. The ECSC is the stock market for the Eastern Caribbean securities market. It is the main stock market that has been licensed by the ECSRC to facilitate trading of securities on that market. So we are essentially a regulator for the securities market, the Eastern Caribbean securities market.
And before I get to Winsome, the crowdfunding project is a joint project with the ECSRC and the Caribbean Development Bank.
Yes, that is correct. So in 2020, at the start of the pandemic, the ECSRC, and I should say as well that the ECSRC, in addition to its regulatory role, it also has a market development role. And the commission would have assessed the environment and determined that there was need for it to provide or offer some sort of assistance to try to assist small businesses that were undergoing some serious stresses at the time. And so the commission would have looked at its market development role and to try to determine how best it could assist in that regard. And this crowdfunding project is what would have come out of the commission's deliberations as to how it can assist the ECCU um, in promoting economic development, assisting these small
With
businesses.
small businesses in
Yes,
particular.
in particular.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Dr. Leslie Winsome, tell me about crowdfunding, because this is what the ECSRC and the CDB have come up with as a solution, a crowdfunding platform. What is crowdfunding really?
Thank you so much, Tony. Well, crowdfunding is exactly what it sounds like. It's raising funds from the crowd, meaning individuals, the general public, usually through an online platform. Crowdfunding has been picking up steam, so to speak, globally. Here in the United States, where I sit, it was triggered by the Jobs Act, which President Obama signed in 2012. And we've seen meteoric rise in crowdfunding platforms since then. Crowdfunding is a pretty new concept in the Caribbean. There are one or two initiatives now in Jamaica and the Bahamas, but of course, we're very excited to bring this concept to the Eastern Caribbean.
And this particular platform that the ECSRC is going to launch, I got from Alusha that it's targeting small and medium enterprises. Is this platform going to work like a sort of, I don't want to say stock market, but are you going to be able to float a company, as it were, or you already have to have a company that's existing and then you go to the platform to see if you can attract investors? I'm going to throw that question back to you, Dr. Leslie.
Yes, you will have to have a company. Let me just backtrack a little bit and give you a sense, because there are different kinds of crowdfunding. Basically, crowdfunding is used to raise funds for a project or for your business. And there's several ways to do this. You can do this through donations, which usually NGOs take this approach, where you're soliciting funding from the public, and the public is basically donating to your project or your business. There is reward crowdfunding, where you're giving the public a reward. Say, if you're a spa, for example, you're perhaps giving free spa treatments, or if you're producing a product, you're going to give away free to the folks who donate or provide your financing via the platform a free product. So that's reward crowdfunding. Then there is another aspect, which is called debt crowdfunding or peer-to-peer lending, where the public is extending a loan for your project or for your business, and that loan has to be paid back with interest. And then finally, and this is where this project is focused, we have equity crowdfunding, where you're providing financing in exchange for shares, for ownership in the company.
So that's the equity part, really. The person who is giving you the finance through the platform or putting in the finance through the platform is getting an equity stake in your business.
Precisely. So we're focusing on companies that are already existing, that have some measure of track record, that have clients, that have financials, because obviously when you're going to post what we call a campaign on the platform, you're going to have to be very transparent about the company itself, the company's journey, the funding you're looking for, and you have to present financials to show track record and financial projections in terms of where you want to go with the company's growth.
So I guess, Alusha, this is where regulation comes in. Somebody's got to be regulating all of this. And I guess around these regulations, there is legislation that also backs this up. Now, tell me, what is the sorts of regulatory type, clauses or language that is associated with something like a crowdfunding platform?
Right. So the Commission has established or developed some rules to govern the activity, the equity crowdfunding that we are promoting. And these rules are going to be tested through this project and also through what we call a regulatory sandbox. It's basically what this means is that the whatever platforms that are interested in carrying out or undertaking the equity crowdfunding in the jurisdiction will be operating in a sort of an incubator like arrangement, where we get to look at how they are operating to make sure that things are being done in a prudent manner for the safety of investors. Some of the rules that, some of the clauses or some of the issues or we aim to address in the crowdfunding rules include things like investor limits, the type of information that should be available to investors, to prospective investors, what the companies that are seeking to raise finance on the market, what they need to provide to the investors and the market so that they can understand what they are investing in, because that is important. And they also need to understand the risks of their investment. So the rules aim to provide a guiding framework to ensure that this equity crowdfunding activity is being undertaken in a way that is in a prudent manner, and for the protection of those persons who would have invested in those companies.
So there are rules and there's legislation, because
Correct.
what I'm getting at here,
Hmm.
if a company
Hmm.
um, solicits funds through your platform, through the
Right.
crowdfunding platform, and several investors participate,
Hmm.
and they get the equity stake. With the equity stake
Hmm.
comes the question of dividends and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And so I understand the need for transparency,
Hmm.
the fact that you have to put up your financials and
Hmm.
whatever else. Okay.
Hmm.
However, suppose the company or the business is less than honest when it comes to paying out the equity. Where does the
Right.
teeth come in
Come in. Right.
for ensuring that
Right.
this company or the directors face some sort of well, criminal, I
That
suppose,
there's, yeah.
consequence.
Right. So that there's recourse in the legislation. Okay. So
Exactly.
the securities market operates, the legislation is that governs the operation of the securities market is the Securities Act, and that legislation was enacted in 2001 in all the member countries, in all the by the parliaments in all the ECCU member countries. And the crowdfunding rules have been prepared or developed based on the Commission's authority under the Securities Act. So essentially, the rules are backed, or the Securities Act is backs the provides the kind of legislative support that you're referring to for those rules.
And this is harmonized legislation
That's
that
correct.
exists in all the member
Co-
states.
Yes, has been
Right,
enacted in each member country. Yes.
right. When some tell me about the likely people to participate in such a or on such a platform. You mentioned small businesses. I'm going to ask you actually to tell me what's your definition first of a small business within the OECS context, and then let's take it from there. They are going to be participating, small and medium enterprises, um, and who are the other stakeholders? Who are the other people that are necessary to create this ecosystem?
Okay, so let me start with the last point. There are several stakeholders that are key to this process. And in fact, I hope we'll talk about this later, that we're having a series of stakeholder consultations at the end of the month around the rules that Alusha mentioned. So obviously we have the entrepreneurs, the business owners who are looking for financing. That's one group of stakeholders. Then we have the actual financial intermediaries, meaning the platforms themselves, the platform or platforms themselves. Then we have the investors, the prospective investors who would want to take bets on these companies. We also have investment advisors or brokers who are a key part of this process, advertising and assisting and advising investors. And then we have the government officials, the ministries of finance and the ministries that deal with micro and small businesses, who would have a say in certainly how the rules are finalized, and who have a direct interest in how the financing for small businesses evolves. And then we have, last but not least, private sector organizations such as the Chamber, which you had Tony, in St. Vincent.
Well, I'm the
And
executive
also,
director. I'm not really the head.
well,
Yeah.
okay, well, okay,
I
but
had this. I had the secretariat.
you're
Yes.
the power behind.
Go ahead, Dr. Leslie.
Right, right. I'm sorry to go on about that, but anyway, and then the business support organizations that will have to provide training to entrepreneurs about how to prepare their campaigns for the platform, among other things, right?
So there's quite a lot of work. There quite a lot of work packages in getting this thing to become a reality. You mentioned the stakeholders there, so there clearly is a need for each of those stakeholders that you mentioned to understand their role and understand their benefits from participating. And maybe I go back to Lucia at this time.
Mhm.
Um, I'm going to come back to you for you to define Winsome to
I
define
know, I know, I
small
know.
businesses. I'm not going to let you off the hook with that. But Lucia, you had mentioned something about limits.
Mhm.
And I suppose investor limits.
Mhm.
Are there limits to financing that a company can be seeking?
Mhm.
How are those limits set? Um, are they going to vary depending on what's the matrix? Is it depending on
Mhm.
company size? What are the factors that make up that matrix?
Right. Excellent question, Tony. One of these all of these factors or these issues are included in the rules. So one of the reasons for the stakeholder consultations is to discuss those specific issues with those persons who will be actually participating in the market. We have included some initial limits, as it were, if you want to call it that, in the rules for to generate some level of discussion among those persons who are actually in the business, those persons who are actually seasoned investors. Because as you'd appreciate, the ECSRC is a regulator. We're not out there in the business. So what we aim to do is really to have consultation on these limits. So initially we've included in the rules a limit of up to 5 million for each business who wants to invest
That's
to
on,
seek
that's on the that's
financing.
that's on the top end.
Yes.
What's on the bottom end? Because the bottom end is the entry level. How I can't just get on this
Right.
platform asking for $200.
Right.
That's a waste of
So
everybody's time. Mhm.
yes. So essentially what we're seeking to do, we haven't established those limits. We have an upper limit, but we're
Mhm.
hoping that after we have those stakeholder consultations, we would be get a better understanding of the needs and to be able to really narrow down and finalize those types of issues. From the investor perspective, because of the we know that investing in small businesses is high risk, and you mentioned something about dividends and getting dividends, and we know that once persons invest in companies, that this is something that they look forward to, getting a return. So with a small business, it's a little slightly different in that these are businesses that are just starting up, just getting off the ground. So what we want investors to understand is that it may take a little while before you actually see a return. So that is one of the risks of investing. um you I know a lot of persons will be expecting, if I put $100, I should get back, maybe my little $20 in dividends or $5, at some point in time. But that we're saying you have to be at a level where you can understand and appreciate that these businesses are just starting up and they may not be able to return an investment to you within a quick time frame. So it's essentially we want the investors to understand that you have to have a certain capacity is what I want
Mhm.
to say, to
Mhm.
absorb the risk and to be able to wait out your investment. So which is why information is important for that type of investing.
Understood. Dr. Leslie, we
Yes,
talk
Tony.
about framing the context of size business when we talk about small business. Um, who exactly, or what size business, what are the parameters that define a small business, small and medium?
Okay, so there's no universal definition across the region, as you know. Each country has its own definition. And quite frankly, I would just say that there are certain parameters that are common across the definition, meaning number of employees, gross revenues, and sometimes investment, right?
Okay.
So I will say that generally speaking, a micro business is defined as a business that has up to 5 employees and around in the, I guess, in the EC parlance, in terms of EC dollars, 100, 150 EC dollars in revenues as a
Thousand,
maximum.
thousand,
I'm sorry,
thousand.
as 100,000, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
to
yes.
150,000 EC dollars as an upper limit,
So
right?
that's annual
That's
turnover.
annual turnover,
Right. And
right?
what about
So
because you mentioned something else as another parameter, and I guess it's a combination of number of employees, annual turnover, and the asset base of the company, the scale of investment. Yeah.
that's yes, but again, not all countries use the asset-based investment indicator as a piece of the puzzle, so to speak. Some countries just use, for simplicity, 2 parameters, right? So, but of course, that poses problems because say if you're a company with 4 employees and you have annual turnover of say 300,000, then is that a micro business or is that a small business? So there are still problems with definitions, but I will say crowdfunding is geared towards early stage companies, right? So companies that have moved past the prototype stage, who are now in the market and are sort of doing business with customers and so on. So
So typically 2 or 3 years of
at least, at
financial
least, at
records.
least, and
So
I would
yeah.
say, revenues above 150,000. So you're
Okay.
moving past the micro stage into the small business stage, and you have a viable product, you have customers, and you have potential for scaling.
Okay. So that's your target. That's where you start the
Right,
target
exactly. So
for the
that's the lower end, but of course, we'll be looking at companies
up
across
to
the
up to
spectrum.
5 million
Exactly,
Yes.
that
exactly.
you're trying to raise.
Right.
Yeah, it's
But yeah,
important that our viewers understand this very point here, because there are small businesses, very small businesses, that are not going to qualify.
right,
They are still very cottage
right, right.
in the way they operate.
Mhm.
Now, which brings me to another question.
Hmm.
Is it a requirement for any business that wants to participate on the platform for them to be legally incorporated?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, because you want to have, again, just think of equity crowdfunding as an alternative traditional equity financing, where absolutely investors need to have a comfort level that these are bona fide companies. And certainly, if you are going to have to do, or certainly the platform will have to do due diligence on these companies. And so you need a bona fide company structure to be able to do that. And secondly, to give comfort to investors that these are legitimate enterprises and not shadow companies, for argument's sake. I will also say that there is a certain level of conservatism, I think, with, generally speaking, with Caribbean investors. When I compare them to their peers here, say angel investors or even the public who invest in crowdfunding.
Here mean in the United
Here, meaning
States.
the US, yes. So I think it's all the more important that this project works to give a certain level of comfort to investors about the companies that will be listing on the platform. And so the rules around that are even more important in the Caribbean case, I think.
We're going to go to a small break in a little bit, but I want to just get one more question before we go to that break out to Alusha. We are aiming for participants on the business side from the OECS or the currency union. So to seek financing from this platform, you must be a business registered in the OECS, yeah, part of the currency union.
Yes.
But on the investor side, is that totally open?
Yes, and that's we are also targeting not just investors in the 8 member countries, but ECCU residents who are in the diaspora. So we have invited, as part of the stakeholder consultations, we've invited persons from in the diaspora to also participate. We understand that our market is small, the 8 islands. We have a very small population and a very even smaller percentage of persons who would be able to invest, have the capacity to invest. And so it's important that we also extend the project to persons in the diaspora who would be willing or can and have the capacity to be able to participate and invest in those companies.
Yeah, but
And
I want to go ahead.
And we have had persons who live in the diaspora who have shown some interest in investing and helping their countries back home, to develop. And so we're hoping that those persons will get the opportunity now to be able to do that.
And I understand that very well, but I also want to be clear on, if I am not a part of the Caribbean diaspora, I'm a citizen of the United States. I live in Washington. I have no other connection with the OECS other than I see this company seeking finance. Can I participate?
Right. Let me be clear, because we will not be advertising or offering any securities in the US market, because of course you would need to have regulations or the authority or the authorization to be able to do that. So I want to make that very clear.
I understand that.
But because the crowdfunding is essentially a platform that is available on the internet, that is available through the internet, it's online. There's no limit to persons who live in the UK, in the US, to participate on the market. But I want to be clear that we are not specifically focused on advertising to those persons to participate.
I totally understand that, and I think at this juncture we can take our one and only break. When we come back, we will continue the discussion. You're looking at Let's Get Down to Business. We will invite our guests to give us some more information on this crowdfunding platform when we come back from the break.
My friends and family often wonder, what is it I really do working at the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission, ECSRC for short? Truth be told, most don't even know what it is. And when I tell them, our role is to protect investors in securities on the Eastern Caribbean Securities Market, ECSM, and to ensure that the market operates in a fair, transparent, and efficient manner by enforcing the provisions of the Securities Act and regulations made under the Act, as well as development of the regional securities market in the territories comprising of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, well, that just makes it worse. But when I explain that securities are really stocks and bonds like they see on TV with the US stock market, they start to get the picture. When I tell them we have regulatory oversight of all licensed brokers and investment advisors, and that we also register companies that offer stocks and bonds to the public on the ECSM, they get the picture even better. The ECSRC exists to ensure every investor is protected from unscrupulous practices, and that the listed companies on the exchange and other companies that have sold securities to the public provide timely and relevant information about their operations. This helps investors and the general public in the region benefit from and reap the rewards from a stable and well-informed securities market. We are ready to act at a moment's notice and are backed by the most up-to-date and modern securities laws enacted in each of the member countries. Impressive, isn't it? Okay, but really, we have an excellent legal team which works hand-in-hand with the legal authorities in the member countries to ensure local laws and international best practices are observed and enforced. The securities laws include provisions to fine and even imprison persons for serious breaches. We take the fair and proper functioning of the market very seriously. We know that the many individual and institutional investors invest some of their hard-earned savings in stocks and bonds that are offered on the market and need to know that someone is ever watchful to protect every investor. We are proud to play our part in the region's development and live by the words our core commitment every day: integrity, fairness, efficiency, and growth. The Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission, protecting investors, building our future.
Looking at Let's Get Down to Business, we are discussing the crowdfunding platform initiative that's being piloted by the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission, a project that is also backed by the Caribbean Development Bank. My guests are, who you've met already, Dr. Winsome Leslie, who is the CEO of Dev Solutions Consulting and a consultant on this project, and Alusha Fisal, the CEO of the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission. I'm going to kick off with you, Winsome, and ask you about the general state of preparedness that businesses must have to be able to truly participate in an effective way with the opportunity the platform would offer.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, first I think, but let's get back to basics. I think companies need to make sure that their financial house is in order in terms of their books, you know, keeping proper records, etc. And this speaks to capacity building training that they would be hopefully receiving in the different countries. But secondly, I come to the whole issue of educating themselves about what crowdfunding is and what it isn't, and to determine through that knowledge whether this is something that would be suitable for their company. And then this leads me to talk about the stakeholder consultations we're having at the end of the month, September 26th to 30th. There's a whole awareness raising piece that's embedded in those consultations. The consultations are basically to get feedback from the different stakeholders, entrepreneurs, investors, brokers, would-be platforms, government officials, and so on around the rules. But I think certainly the entrepreneurs could take the opportunity to come to those consultations to not only learn about the rules, but also to be educated about crowdfunding more broadly, to help them to think through whether this could be useful for their company as a fundraising strategy. Secondly, there is going to be more in-depth training available on crowdfunding in the case of entrepreneurs, how to put together a campaign and so on. And so I think that going on the website, you will have information to be able to register your interest first of all, and then register your desire to have this kind of training from me in particular for this project. Lastly, I'd like to also say that in terms of preparation, companies will have to also secure assistance from accountants, lawyers, and so on to put their campaigns together and to make sure that they are consistent, or they're being consistent with what the rules require. So it's not a slam dunk in terms of just getting up and saying, hey, I'm interested and I want to be on the platform. There's a whole preparatory process that needs to take place. But having said that, I think this could be a very useful way of raising funds. A small amounts of money from a large group could be highly effective for certain kinds of firms who might not qualify for a bank loan or are not interested in a bank loan and who are too small to be attractive to an angel investor or a venture capitalist.
In terms of the pitching the campaign, is that the company will be required to maybe give up a prospectus, I suppose, to the would-be investors or investor? Because if I was an investor, I would, apart from just looking at your books, I would want to see where you plan to take the company.
Right. There's information. Yeah. It's not a prospectus per se. That's more traditional equity financing, which is a whole legal document. Mm-hmm. This is generally a campaign consists of several things. It's a short video that captures the company, its essence, what's happening, the team, etc. It's sort of like a pitch in a way, but then there are also other materials that have to be posted, meaning your financials, sort of a description of the team, a sort of a financial projections in terms of where the company wants to go and how much money you're hoping to raise and in what period of time. So all of that information has to be posted on the platform, and the platform will have guidelines in terms of how that should be posted and what the elements should be for all those pieces. Also, companies have to be committed to regular reporting their investors. So it's not just posting a campaign, getting your funding and going off into the sunset. There are obligations, ongoing obligations to the investors once, assuming you raise funds, right? The other thing to note, and this will come in the training later on that I'll provide, is that companies need to be aware that you have to think very carefully about how much you want to raise. Because if you set a very high target and you don't raise that target, then you don't get any funding.
Right. So you've got to hit the sweet spot, as it were.
Precisely. You've got to gauge your would-be investor audience, and you have to gauge also how much money you need to give you sufficient runway for 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, depending on what your goals are. So this is something that we'll talk about in the training, but it's something that's important to get right so that you can be successful in your campaigns.
Now, there's and I'm going to go to you, Alusha. There's a distinction that I think needs to be made here, because at the start of the program, I was sort of making the comparison to the way the stock market operates, you know?
Yes.
But this is not the stock market.
Right.
This is
it's private.
It's private.
Yes.
Right. So the distinction I want to make here is that if I am an investor in a company that is on the platform and I am participating via that means, I get my equity stake. Can I sell my shares? What are the rules there? Is it something that the EC SRC is going to govern, or is that going to be a private arrangement with
Right.
the business owner and the equity stakeholder?
Right. Excellent question, Tony. I would prefer to use the word informal, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to when we're comparing, the crowdfunding platform with the stock exchange. It's more of an informal kind of arrangement,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of the risk that is involved in investing. The commission, in developing the rules, didn't think that it would be appropriate at this time, at this piloting stage, to
Mm-hmm.
allow persons to sell, to create that sort of secondary market for shares that are purchased in those companies. And one of the reasons is because, like I was saying, small businesses are, you know, there's the risk involved in investing in those small businesses. And of course, there's time. Some of these companies, as Winsome indicated, are startups, and they would need time to grow, to develop their business. And so, what the commission thinks is that we would want persons to at least hold on to those shares for a little while, before, as part of this pilot arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that it's totally and entirely off the table at some point, but
Right.
because we're at a pilot stage, we want to make sure that, we get everything correct and in order, at that point, before we consider those other types of arrangements,
Yeah. And I suppose, the stock market is going to be, it was a lot more dynamic medium,
Yes.
because if you're talking about selling shares,
Mhm.
Dr. Leslie, you're basically saying that I'm going to know at any instant what the share value is. um, so
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
factor that
Yeah.
isn't really embedded in
Mhm.
this model that we are speaking about. So go ahead.
That's true. That's true. Again, just we should look at this venture as a pilot. I think certainly I look at this as the equity crowdfunding structure for the OECS as an alternative model that perhaps might be more appropriate for the OECS countries than, say, the traditional angel investment and venture capital plays. For one, there is not the ecosystem, the angel investment ecosystem. There are no angel investment networks in the OECS. There are no venture capital arrangements the way, say, there are in Jamaica, where there's a structure already in place. So because the countries are smaller, because the populations are smaller, because the businesses are smaller, relatively speaking, I think this might be a more viable option for equity investing than the traditional. And as Alusha rightly pointed out, because this is a pilot, it's a little bit premature to thinking about, for companies or investors rather, to be thinking about exiting companies, selling their shares in the short term. I think
Right.
the folks we're looking for investors who are willing to walk the walk along with these companies,
Mm-hmm.
and equity investment is supposed to be patient capital. So we're hoping that the investors are going to be patient and
Mm-hmm.
walk along with these companies as they grow, rather than saying, well, I'm in for a year and I'm going to sell my shares.
Yeah.
First of all, you're not going to get a return, but also more importantly, I think we're looking at a more developmental kind of play as opposed to purely speculative, if you know what I
Right.
mean.
Yes, yes, I understand that very well. But I think maybe on the regulatory side, on the rules side, um, maybe that needs to be established somehow, that rather than just hoping for the investor to be patient, maybe there is a buffer period that you say, okay, fine, you can't exit
Mhm.
under
Mm-hmm,
3 years, or
mm-hmm,
something like that, so that
mm-hmm.
that is clearly understood.
Right,
You
right.
Yes.
know.
Yes,
because
yes.
then you get the gray lines between speculation and
Right,
Right, right, right.
yeah.
And I think
right.
this is why these are the kinds of comments, Tony, we're hoping for in the stakeholder consultations to
Mhm.
really
Yes,
make the rules robust and to make sure that everyone has had a say in the
yeah.
design. And so we have more buy-in across the board, across stakeholders for this program.
So
So that's a big.
our time is fast ticking down, and I want to get in a few more things. Alusha, on the regulatory side, you are not going to be operating the platform. I understand that very clearly. Okay, and the regulator can't regulate itself, so I understand that.
Mhm.
Um, what or who are going to be the operators of such a platform? And the platform, I suppose, is who you would issue the license to. Um,
Mm.
how is that going to work? Where the platform operators or operator is going to be found, or where they're going to come from?
Right. Okay, so we have and will be establishing a regulatory sandbox, which I mentioned earlier up in the interview.
Mm.
Um, Sandbox is intended to allow prospective companies or persons in the jurisdiction in the ECCU member countries who have established um, platforms or IT operations that can facilitate crowdfunding. So in that sandbox, it's the commission will take a watching will take a review essentially how this platform operates. We have established rules as to how the sandbox will operate, and we will be monitoring and looking at those companies. It may be one or two, and just to say that we had an interest from somebody in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who had indicated an interest some years ago to the commission in establishing or developing that kind of arrangement or crowdfunding platform in the jurisdiction. So there are one or two persons that are already have indicated an
Mhm.
interest in um, performing or performing the role of or being the crowdfunding platform in the jurisdiction. And I'm happy to say that this gentleman is also has already signed up for the stakeholder consultation. So we're looking forward to that. So these
Excellent.
these companies will be from the jurisdiction. We're hoping that we can have one or two or maybe three operating and
Mm.
in that sandbox so that we can monitor the operations to make sure that everything is being operated or being done in accordance with the rules. Just to say, in terms of licensing, because it's a sandbox, we won't be. It's not a situation where these companies are expected to be licensed. Um, what we will do is essentially give them authorization. And I'm not sure that the difference between
Yeah.
authorization and licensing might be a thin line, but essentially it's not. What I want to say is that
Hmm.
it's not the type of formal kind of licensing arrangement, because I don't want to scare persons
That's
off.
but that's in the
Right.
sandbox phase. But
Yes,
I
yes.
suppose the phase after the sandbox is actually
Right.
the full launch. Am
Yes.
I am
After
I
afterwards. So
right?
after the piloting,
And that
yeah.
is the license. That's the part where you would require a license
Yes, so well, the
outside
commission
of the.
has not yet determined what type of, whether it would be registration or licensing
Mhm.
that would be required. But of course, there would be some level of authorization that has to be to take place after that pilot phase.
Understood. Let's look at some timelines now. We are, well, the pilot phase, I suppose you can say that started. At least you are doing the regulations. You're going to start the sandbox operation. Give me some timelines with some as a consultant in this project, and when are you hoping to hit that milestone where we're fully operational?
Okay, in terms of the project itself, the project ends at the end of January. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're having these consultations at the end of this month. We will be in, and those consultations will include awareness raising around what is crowdfunding, what it can do, advantages, disadvantages, etc. We are going to be running training sessions with stakeholders running from October, late October into end of November. And around that time, the sandbox process will be launched as well, which would go into January. So we're hoping to hit our milestones in terms of awareness raising and the platform, the number of individuals or companies on the platform and so on, certainly by the end of January.
Okay, well, we are sadly at the end of our time, and I'm going to allow 90 seconds, 2 minutes max for you to give your final you know bits of information, anything you think you may have missed out. You don't have to utilize all my 2 minutes, if you don't if you don't need to. So I'm going to start with you, Alusha. Any final words?
Yes, thank you again, Tony, for giving us the opportunity to speak to the public in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as I'm hoping the rest of the member countries about this very important project. And as Winsome and I like to say, it's going to be a game changer for our jurisdiction, for the ECCU member countries. And so we're hoping that we can get full support and participation of persons in the member countries. I just want to say as well, we want to say thank you to the CDB through its Caribbean Technological Consultancy Services arm that has provided the financial support for the commission to be able to put on this to engage in this very important and significant activity in the capital markets in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union.
And Winsome, any final thoughts?
Thanks so much, Tony. It's really a pleasure to be on your program again. And I will say I'm very excited about the prospects for this project. I would encourage all stakeholders in the ECCU countries, that's particularly the groups we've mentioned, to really go on the website, get information on this project, express your interest, because I think this is an opportunity for firms, investors, investment brokers, and so on, to really benefit from this new approach to financing.
Well, it's been a real pleasure having both of you, and I think we managed to get across quite a bit of information on this exciting initiative. I would like, in my final words as well, to encourage the businesses across the region, across the currency union, to prepare themselves. We spoke a bit about preparedness, to prepare themselves to participate. As you know, Winsome, and I'm sure you know, Alusha, as well, we need to move a lot of businesses out of the informal sector, get them into the formal sector, get them structured so that all the developmental support that's out there on offer can be targeted in the right channel, and also it's what the region needs to get serious economic growth. But I'm not the expert. I'm just the host in this program. And once again, I want to thank you for participating. This has been another edition of Let's Get Down to Business. The next time we speak about this project, we're going to do a live, and that is going to allow you to interact with the panelists, who I'm sure are going to be these two people, plus maybe some more that will return. Thank you for viewing. See you next time. Let's get down to business.